Welcome to the Women and Money Empowerment Show. My name is Yulin Lee, and I am your host. In these episodes, you will hear my heart-to-heart conversations with women from all walks of life, sharing their wisdom and their journey to success. I hope through these stories, you will find inspirations and affirmation that ordinary people like you and me, we can achieve extraordinary results and live an extraordinary life. Now, let's dive into today's show. Hello, Gina. Welcome to the Women, Money, Empowerment Show. I am so happy to have you on the show. And the reason is because you are a self-love expert. And I know self-love is so deeply interrelated with the subject of money and empowerment. And so that's why I'm so delighted to have you on the show. But before we dive into our conversation, could you tell our audience, who is Gina?
Great. Yes. Well, thank you for having me here, Yulin. My name is Gina Coviello, and I am a personal coach in the area of self-love. Very briefly, I'm someone who grew up with basically with a lot of self-loathing. I was the survivor of a tremendous amount of emotional abuse throughout my life, but particularly in my childhood, which set me up for not making some of the best decisions in my life. And as I have gotten into my 50s, I've had a couple of situations where I really started to learn how to choose me and how to properly love myself. And it has made such a difference in my life. I used to be completely unfulfilled in my life. And I'm in a space now where I've made huge progress and I feel so much better in most areas of my life. And since I've gone through that, basically from 0 to 60, if you will, if you make a car analogy, I've made a huge transition. And I want to share that. I want to give that gift to other people because it is the best gift I've ever given myself. And I have a dream of really helping other people achieve the same thing for themselves. So I'm here to help people love themselves in a very beautiful way, which should create a much more fulfilling life for them.
Yeah, well, that's such a heartwarming story. And I think there's so much that we can go in a little bit deeper. And so, first of all, self-love for me, when I talk about the work that I do, which is empowerment coaching, money empowerment coaching, I always say that when people take agency, take control of their finances, that is the ultimate expression of self-love. And particularly for women, because so many women were raised in an environment or conditioned with the idea that we need men to take care of us.
Right.
And so, there's just so much along the baggage along with that. But part of it is that, on one hand, we have to rely on men or another person to take care of us. Then that also leads to this, well, I need to also do something else. And then in the process of that, losing ourselves and, part of self-care and self-respect is also part of that whole mix. But in particular, what I see a lot in the area of money and finance, and as it relates to self-love, I see that there's a lot of misinterpretation or misuse of what self-love really is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason I say that is because I oftentimes hear people say things like, when they're out shopping, when they're buying something for themselves, that they would say phrases like, well, I deserve it, right? I need to do some self-love for myself, right? And, when I hear people say that, what comes to my mind is that if you have to convince yourself that you deserve it, then what that tells me is deep down, you actually don't believe that you deserve it. So you have to convince yourself. Otherwise, if it's a deep down, deep rooted belief that, of course, I deserve everything in this world, it's not even a question, right? And so, so that's what I mean by the kind of maybe the misinterpretation or misuse. And then oftentimes when people practice self-love, it's tied to spending money,
Right.
And spending money on yourself is not a bad thing. It could be part of self-love, but I'm sure self-love is so much more. And so I would love for you to just share, like from a holistic perspective, what is self-love?
Yeah. So self-love in general is the ability to just simply advocate and show up for yourself all day, every day, in every area of life. Certainly totally applies to finances, but it's in any area of your life. You should feel comfortable sticking up for yourself. Not, yelling at somebody, but if somebody has mistreated you, you should be comfortable saying, hey, I don't appreciate the way you spoke to me. Please don't speak to me that way anymore. But in every area of life, just being able to show up for you and knowing that you are valuable,
Mhm,
you are important, you should feel comfortable prioritizing yourself. You
mhm,
should feel comfortable spending money on yourself.
mhm.
And you make a great point about spending money on yourself. Like if you're out shopping and I've seen this ad one time. It was for one of these reality shows, and a woman was buying or wanting a diamond ring, right? And she was like, well, I've earned this, $20,000 ring or whatever it was. That is not self-love.
Yeah,
That is probably someone who's saying, I need to look as good as my best friend, and having this ring, makes me look as good as her. That's not self-love.
yeah,
That is comparing yourself to somebody else or saying that I am not valuable unless I have this expensive thing or, Gucci bag or whatever it is.
yeah. That justification.
Yeah. If you are coming from a place of love of self, I want to have a reliable car to get me to work or to take me wherever, and I deserve to have a car that isn't going to break down all the time, yeah, that's self-love. But if you're saying I have to have a, Testarossa or whatever because I won't look good to my friends unless I pull up to work in that kind of a car, that's not self-love. So your intention behind any financial decision can be self-loving. It can also be self-loathing. And if it's coming from a place of love of self, taking good care, then it's self-love. But if it's coming from some fear-based thing, I'm not good enough, I don't, I'm going to be rejected if I don't do this, then that's not self-love. That's self-loathing. And you're actually reinforcing the self-loathing when you make any decision based on, I'm not going to be perceived as good enough unless I do this, then you're only reinforcing the lack of self-love. So it
Yeah.
compounds it. It makes it worse when you make financial decisions from that kind of a place.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad. So there are two things I want to like speak to based on what you just said.
Yeah.
That making that distinction between self-love and self-loathing. And I think so many times um, people can't necessarily distinguish, one from the other. Like I say, maybe it's, masked as self-love, but in reality, it's self-loathing. So having the
Yeah.
awareness of that distinction could really be helpful for people to say, oh, next time when they check in with it within themselves, it's like, is this really a self-love expression or am I kind of doing self-loathing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it can be a really fine line. And you may
Yeah.
think, no, no, I deserve this. I'm allowed to have this. But it could, you really have to look deep into your subconscious to see where is this actually coming from? And sometimes that can be hidden from us. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know it's a good to check in though. Is this a good or a bad place I'm coming from in making this decision? Yeah.
Right, right. And to this point of deserving, because I know this is such a sensitive word for so many people, and particularly for women. I always say that you deserve anything you want in this world,
Yeah.
just not at the same time. You can't just say, I want this and this and this and this, right?
Right.
Anytime I want, because most of us have limited amount of financial resources,
Yeah.
right? And so it really comes down to it's not a question of deserving or not. It comes down to, is this the right time for this purchase? And that
Right.
becomes more objective. That question becomes more objective. Like based on my current circumstances right now, Does it make sense? Is it in my budget to spend $20,000 on a ring? And if you have a lot of money there somewhere that you've already budgeted for this, go for it,
Yeah.
right? So it's not about the amount or what you're buying. Is it really, it's more of a question, is this the right time for this purchase based on my financial situation?
Yeah, and you're right. Like we do deserve everything that you want to have in your life. You do deserve it. There's no question.
Right.
Everybody deserves, to be treated with love and respect or to be able to live comfortably. Some things, though, do take time,
Yeah.
right, to be able to save up the money, and that's okay too, right? If you want to take that, $50,000 first class vacation, you may not be able to do it next month, but it's okay to save up for it in a
Yeah.
year or two or three. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And taking the time to plan it and earn and save up for it will it'll be so worth it when you do get around to doing it. Yeah, we
Yeah.
can't live our whole lives all at once anyway, right? We do have
Right.
to,
Right.
make
So
space for
it
certain
comes
things.
down to, it's not a question of deserving. It comes down to making choices,
Yeah. Yeah.
making choices and to have, to make better decisions at the end.
Right. Because I could take the money and go on that $50,000 vacation now, but if I do that, that's going to harm my future retirement savings. And so it's a choice.
Yeah.
Do I take the luxury thing today or do I wait so that I can have a more comfortable retirement, 10
Right.
years from now or whenever I start that? Yeah.
Right. Right.
Choices. Everything's about choice.
That's
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so the other thing that you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to kind of going deeper on that, which is what you said at the beginning, is actually it's about how you show up, like
Yeah.
how you show up for yourself to do self-advocation, to advocate for yourself.
Right.
And that reminds me of also with many women, the challenge that they have whenever they are in conversations around money or finance, and whenever they feel um, uncomfortable because they may not know the terminology, they may not know
Sure.
the things that being talked about. I sometimes see women just get quiet.
Yeah.
They may have questions, but they're too afraid or too embarrassed to ask the question. And that's
Absolutely.
another point where I always tell clients, it's like, no, if you don't understand something, raise your hand and ask. It is okay. And
Yeah.
so when you say how you show up, again, that's part of self-love. And it's not just, oh, you need to be more assertive, you need to be more outspoken. It is also a form of self-love.
Yeah. And it comes with being honest with yourself, right? Like, yeah, if I don't understand this financial term, it's perfectly okay that I don't know what it is. There's no shame in that. I don't know. I'm not a rocket scientist. I don't know everything on the planet. It's totally okay to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. Could you explain that better?
Yeah.
And there is a power in not being concerned if the other person perceives you as being unintelligent. Who knows if they do or if they don't, but even if they do, so what? That's their problem.
Yeah.
I need to understand this so that I can make the best decision for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes, showing up for myself is having the honesty and saying I don't know what that means. There's
Yeah.
no shame in that. Absolutely.
Right, right, right. Just to, really about embracing yourself as a whole person and knowing that no one in this world is perfect. No one in this world knows everything anyway. It
Right.
doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a very big deal to show up for yourself in that way. And just like I said, just admitting that you don't know it, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Um, Nobody that I talk to knows everything that I'm talking about. I haven't read every single book that you may have read. So if you mention the name of a book and I haven't read it, I'm going to say, what is that book about? Whatever it may be. Um, it is very self-loving to advocate for yourself,
Hmm.
no matter what it is, and you can do it nicely.
Right.
And again, it's not about being rejected or perceived as anything bad if you don't know the answer or what that's about. It's okay. Just ask. It's okay.
Right.
Yeah, it's very
And so,
self-loving to do that.
right. And so, I think this is my belief that most people who are listening to our conversation right now, at the conscious level, at the intellectual level, they're probably agreeing with most of the things we're saying. Like, yeah, I know, I agree. How would somebody know that they actually need help in the area of self-love?
So there's a potential a lot of indicators. One is very, which I think we're all aware of, is your negative self-talk. This is my subconscious talking to me. I am somebody who had constant negative self-talk. Oh, don't say that. You're going to look like an idiot. Oops, what are they going to say if I say this? Or can I do that? Is that okay? There was self-judgment all the time.
Mm,
And so, if you've got negative self-talk, if you're making yourself feel small, or if you are holding back on saying or doing something because you're afraid of someone else's judgment, those are indicators that you probably don't have a good relationship with yourself and that you're living in fear all the time. And fear doesn't have to look like being afraid. Anything that is not love is fear. So depression, hopelessness, all of anger, those are all coming from a place of fear. And if you're, again, negative self-talk is just one way to be able to determine if you're in a place of self-love or not. If that's not kind, loving, supportive words coming to you, that's not self-love.
mhm,
If you think of if your child were to make a mistake, what are the types of things you would say to your child? Because usually we're there to support and uplift our children. If you're saying something that doesn't sound like what you would say to your child, it's probably not loving. And so yeah, your negative self-talk is a way to, it's a big indicator because I think it's there all the time for a lot of us. And if it's not supportive, then you're probably not in a place of self-love, and you would really benefit
mm.
from learning how to love yourself better.
Yeah. Although I would say that sometimes we may say things to our kids that may not always be supportive, also, but then that's also a indication of, if I can say that to my kids, I'm probably very likely I'm saying that to myself as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because often when we are yelling or getting angry or saying something unkind to someone else, it is generally usually about your own, I call it your own internal garbage.
Mhm.
I had an instance with, I have 3 children. I'm a divorced single mom. I have 3 children. And I remember one day one of my kids said the wrong thing to me, and I totally blasted my child. And I knew right away, I went to my room to calm down afterward, and I knew right away that wasn't about what he said to me at all. That was about the 50 or 100 other people who have said that to me before. And it was just this built up thing, right? So, right, when we let out and yell at somebody, it usually isn't about that particular person. It is about something else going on internally.
Yeah.
So I went back to my child right away and said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. You did not deserve that." But most of the time we don't recognize
Right.
that wasn't really about him. That was me. And I was glad that I went back to him and apologized. But
Oh,
yeah, it's
that's so
usually
good.
not about that person. So, right, if you're yelling at your child, it's probably your own stuff coming up and not really about what they did or said. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
I think, as parents, we've all done those. We've all had those moments, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a totally normal human experience.
Right, right. And again, I think, how can we practice self-love in this aspect of, um, doing a little bit more self-love so I can be more loving and more compassionate and more understanding of our kids as well.
Yes, exactly. Because when you are in a better relationship with yourself, you are going to show up differently in your other relationships, right?
Mhm.
When you're in a place of being happy and feeling fulfilled, you bring to another relationship, you bring compassion and kindness and patience. But if you're not in a place of self-love, you're going to find yourself bringing anger and frustration and resentment to those relationships. So
Right.
when you're healthier within yourself, you
Mhm.
are going to find your other relationships will also be healthier. Yeah.
Okay. So back to my, earlier question, a follow on to that, the first one is, how would somebody know that they may need some self-love help? How can they identify themselves? But what if they, listen to this conversation and they realize they do need some help. But maybe for whatever reason, they feel stuck. They, even with the awareness that they still feel stuck and not being able to move forward or take actions to make the changes. What can they do? Or maybe you can share your own experience of how did you get from 0 to 60?
Right.
How did you get out of the situation so that you can be at the 60 speed?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. A lot of the situations that come up where we are not being self-loving, it really has to do with how your subconscious feels about you, which generally is formed in childhood. And the way to reform your subconscious is by being aware of what you're doing all day, every day, and making conscious choices. And we talked about it's all about choices that you make. So when you're in a conversation with someone and they say something to you that makes you feel bad, the way you respond to that matters. And you can choose to advocate for yourself. And like I sort of mentioned this earlier, and just to respond and say, hey, I don't appreciate you making me feel small in this moment. And, would you please be more careful not to do that in the future? However the conversation goes. But you can choose to pay attention to what you're doing and understand the choices you're making. So I have this example. It's a very simple life example. If I am coming home from work at the end of the day, and my plan is to make dinner, put dinner on the table, and then I want to go for a walk for myself, right? Because I need to just get outside and do some exercise. And when I come home, if my child says to me, Mom, I need cookies for tomorrow at school, you have to make me cookies tonight. So I have a choice, don't I? I can either make those cookies, but then I'm probably not going to have time to go for my walk. Would not be a self-loving choice, right? If I'm giving up that walk, and it's a choice, or I can choose to maybe walk to my grocery store and purchase cookies, right? Which would be that way I would get my walk in, which was for me, and then my child would also be getting those cookies. So I've served both our needs in a way that was still supportive of my needs. So just being aware of the choices that you make
Yeah.
all day, every day. Because I know I did this exercise, I don't know, 2 years ago. I came across this challenge, and the challenge was very simple. This is in light of forgiveness and acceptance.
Mm.
And you write out every person in your life that has ever hurt you that you want to be able to forgive. So you write out who it is and what they did to you. And you just make this list as long as it needs to be. And then, afterward, you could like burn the list or bury it or whatever you want to do with it. So I decided to do this. And what came up for me on the list, after I got 20 or 30 items, I realized that I chose to think negative things about myself based on what other people had said and done to me. And as I continued down my list, my name showed up more and more on the list. And I realized I have hurt myself more than anyone else in my life.
Wow,
And
that's
so again, it's
powerful.
those choices, right? And I did not expect for me to show up on that list at all. And the instructions never said to include yourself.
Mm.
But I realized that, oh my God, I've done myself the most harm. And I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of the things that I am doing that hurt myself. And so it was a
Right.
kind of a hard realization to know, oh my gosh, I'm doing the most damage. Because
Yeah,
I thought, oh yeah, I have a lot of people to be mad at. And I'm like, oh no, I did a lot of that.
right.
So it's just being aware of the choices you make in every moment. And it's hard to pay attention if you're not used to watching yourself and paying attention. It's hard. It takes practice, but
Right.
I absolutely, pay attention to the internal conversation that you have all day, every day, and every choice you make, whether to eat a salad for dinner or to have a candy bar, that's a choice, right? Every little thing that we do I save 5% of my income or do I go spend it on this Gucci bag that I want? Everything is a choice.
Right, right. So, how did you get yourself out of, if you don't mind me asking, how
Yeah.
did you get yourself out of a unhealthy situation and to being on your own and now really thriving? Because I'm asking this question because I do come across many women who are in unhappy, unhealthy relationships or marriages,
Right.
and they're unhappy, they're not satisfied, but yet they don't feel like if they can make any change
Yeah.
because they're maybe financially dependent on the man or the partner, or maybe there are some other factors as well. Can you share what was maybe one or two things that really help push you over the edge and to say, you know what, enough is enough?
Yeah. Yeah, I was totally in that situation where I was in an unhappy marriage. For me, it was an unhappy marriage. It was emotionally abusive, and it took me a long time to be aware of that. But right, I knew that I wanted a divorce, but I was too afraid to get out of it for financial reasons, right? So I had this fear of, I want out, but what's going to happen to me when I tell him I want a divorce and I'm on my own? Because I had three children and my dad was living with us and he was in the early stages of dementia.
Mm,
So I was very, very afraid of how I was going to support me and my three children and my dad.
mm,
So I stayed in this unhealthy situation for several years. Um, and what happened during that time, like I knew I wanted out, but I stayed, and that was a choice. But I continued over those couple of years. My resentment for my husband grew more and more and more and more, right? So the relationship was continuing to deteriorate. And I realized suddenly one day that I was harming myself by staying in this, what turned out, unfortunately, to be a toxic relationship for me. There, so it was one day we had a little thing that happened in the morning, and everybody went off to school and to work, and I was working at home supporting, we had our own business, and I was the support staff. And I had like an hour's worth of work. And I was sitting at my desk and I couldn't get my work done because I was just replaying not only that incident that happened that morning, but every incident in the last 3 or 4 years, and I just was stewing in all of this misery and I couldn't even get this simple 1 hour's worth of work accomplished. And it struck me in that moment, I am harming myself by staying in this relationship. The longer I stay, the worse it's going to get. It's not going to get any better.
mhm,
And that was a really, like, that shifted for me. And I told him that afternoon I want a divorce. And I think it was a complete shock to him, right?
mm,
Because I had stayed quiet for the most part about how I felt. And I know that that was not healthy.
mhm,
Um, maybe we could have worked on the relationship had I told him sooner that I was not happy. But I decided this is it. I can't, there's no support for me. Um, and the fear of staying in the relationship became bigger than my fear of leaving. And so
mm,
that was for me, that was the critical shift,
mhm,
that staying was worse than leaving. And
mm.
so, yeah, that was what prompted me to tell him finally how I really felt. And I have to say, getting out of that unhealthy relationship was at that point of my life the single most self-loving thing I've ever done for myself.
Mm.
Um, and it was a baby step because more stuff came later, but that was like a baby step for me in my journey of self-love.
Wow. So to really get yourself moving, there was there was a moment where you realize the fear of staying and the pain it would, or the damage or the pain it would cause would be bigger and greater than the fear of leaving, which is the unknown, right? I think a lot of times
Yes.
it's the unknown. Well, because I hear that from a lot of women, right? About,
Yeah.
the biggest fear about going through a divorce, especially, financially, you're not the one in charge or you're not the one who's making the money, is, am I going to be out on the street with my kids?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so what I'm hearing is even being out on the street doesn't seem as scary as staying in and just being damaged in a different way, I guess.
Yeah, right. Like I said, I knew that it was just like it came to me in a light bulb moment. Oh my gosh, this is the like I'm in such an unhealthy relationship that I felt like I was drowning, right? And I'm like, I'm never gonna come up for air if I
Yeah.
stay. And
Yeah.
so I realized, I guess it was like my own life, the value of my own life suddenly rose up, and that was my impetus to start
Mhm.
loving myself was because
Mhm.
I deserved better. That
Yeah.
was I was actually like another big realization. It was part of it came later, but
Mhm.
knowing that I deserve to be happy, I deserve to be loved and supported because I was not loved and supported.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally get the fear of the unknown. It was totally restricting me from moving on with my life.
Right.
But
Right.
it was the two fears, and they kind of shifted, and then one became worse than the other. So yeah,
Right. And then I guess as someone who has gone through it now and looking back, it's I'm sure it was not easy, but still the unknown, because I think for many women, the unknown seems so huge, so hard to get over, right?
absolutely.
But as someone who has gone through it, the unknown, once you've gone through, you look back, it's actually not that bad. I mean,
Right.
it's difficult,
Yeah. Yeah.
but compared to the pain of if you had to stay in there, keep going, not only the damage it's doing to you, but also what are the ripple effects to the children?
Yeah. And my dad, in my case. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And you and I, Yulin, have talked about self-limiting beliefs. And so we often believe we're not capable
Mhm.
of providing for ourselves, but that's just a story we tell
Yeah.
ourselves because of fear of the unknown. And it's valid that it's scary. Like I wouldn't want anyone to think less of themselves for being afraid of the unknown. Um, but it's just a story that you're telling yourself to keep you in a place that is currently safe, even though it's not healthy.
Right.
It's
Right.
but to believe in yourself and know that I will be able to figure something out.
Right.
To have that courage and trust in self that you will be able to survive. It may not look great at first. It may take you some time, and it's taken me. So that was 2017. This is 2024. I
Mm.
am just recently coming into a place where I can say, yeah, I'm starting to thrive. So
Yeah.
it has been several years.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and we had a house in California that we sold because of the divorce. That gave me financial resources to survive off of until I got myself figured out. But not everybody has that luxury.
Right.
But you can, you
You
just,
will figure it out. Like
you
we
will.
will figure out the way will show up once we've make a decision. And I think that's
Yeah.
also the big message here.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you
So,
take that first step,
right.
subsequent steps will start to reveal themselves at some point. Yeah.
Right, right. And so, as a self-love coach, what does it look like for you to help a client? Like if someone, after listening to this conversation, they realize, you know what, I am in that situation and I could really use some help and support. How does that work?
So with my own coaching business, so it's just general coaching, and coaching is not the same as therapy. I don't know, coaching is becoming a bigger thing. Um, Coaching is really about I am helping you see what is possible in your life. So I am not feeding you the answers. I am asking lots of questions about you and your experiences and how you feel, and about exploring sometimes those stories that we tell ourselves, is that really true? Are you really not capable of earning $100,000 salary or whatever it is you're telling yourself? Right. And it's just one on one, just like this. And depending on what the client is looking to work on, and then I just start asking questions and we just talk just like this. But I am delving into your life, and how you feel about things. And we talk about how things happened in your childhood that adds to how you feel about yourself today. I also have a self-love quiz that I do which kind of reveals some areas of life, like money is one of the questions is around money. And then we can work on certain areas of life. Are you comfortable being alone? Are you comfortable spending money on yourself? Are you comfortable receiving gifts or compliments? And these are areas of life where self-love shows up or not. And then we can talk about those specific areas and how you interact with the world and how you can show up for yourself in a more loving way.
Great, great, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom and your experiences. Because I think, again, for most of us, I believe that ordinary people can live an extraordinary life and achieve extraordinary results. And
Yes.
I think you totally exemplify that. And I want the same message to go out to as many people as possible. So thank you again for being on this show. And so how can people find you if they're interested in working with you?
Yeah, I've got a website. It's coachginacoviello.com. So you can go to my website. I have a blog, and you can email me there as well if you want to, talk to me. I can do a discovery call with you, and we can talk about your circumstances and see if, it might be a good fit for you to work with me. And I welcome the opportunity to talk to people. I'm also offering some free workshops. Again, you can email me through my website, and inquire about my free workshops that I do online. Yeah.
Great, great. Well, thank you again for being on the show with me. And
My pleasure.
yeah, we'll talk soon again. Thank you for tuning in to the Women and Money Empowerment Show. If you ever have doubt for moments about yourself, your capability, or your worthiness, please remember to keep coming back to these stories and lean in. Draw the wisdom and strength from these incredible women and know that you also have what it takes to live a fulfilling life. Until next time, have a fabulous day.